conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, this evening, Jeremy Corbyn's been holding talks with Jewish groups, including the Board of Deputies of British Jews and the Jewish Leadership Council, to address anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And once that finishes, we'll speak to our reporter, who is down in Westminster this evening. Corbyn clearly coming under quite a bit of pressure from within his own party and without. But the big story really is what's happening in Washington. It's the first state visit of the Trump presidency. And of course, we would have expected that to have been America's closest ally over the last century and more. But no, it's not. No, absolutely not. It is, of course, Emmanuel Macron. And it's happening on a big scale. Melania's been involved with organising the banquet for this evening, and it's really a big, big do. Why is it happening? Well, it's happening, I think, because on the 14th of July last year, Bastille Day, President Trump was invited by Emmanuel Macron to attend Paris as the guest of honour, and the red carpet was laid out. There was a huge parade. There was no sign of any protesters, nobody of any significance within the French political system opposing his visit. In fact, they all thought it was really very much a good idea. And from that, Trump and Macron have said quite nice things about each other. You know, when Piers Morgan interviewed the president, he talked about his friend Emmanuel. And having met Macron last week, as I did, I met him and I attended this lunch with him. My views on globalism and his views on globalism are diametrically opposed, as indeed are President Trump's. But I have to say, having met him, he is an interesting guy. There is something about him. He's got a bit of style. He's got a bit of pizzazz. And clearly he's there today, showing himself to be the prominent European leader. Mrs. Merkel is going to be visiting within the course of the next couple of weeks, and that will not be a full state visit and will not be as grand an occasion. So let's just hear a little of today's press conference with President Macron and President Trump.
Mr. President, they're all saying what a great relationship we have, and they're actually correct. It's not fake news. Finally, it's not fake news. So it's a great honor that you're here. But we do have a very special relationship. In fact, I'll get that little piece of dandruff for that little piece. We have to make him perfect. He is perfect. So it is really great to be with you, and you are a special friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to thank President Trump and your country, your people, for this very warm welcome, this wonderful ceremony. Indeed, we, both of us, just reminded how great our common history is, and that each time we work together in order to protect liberty and freedom and our peace. And we have a lot of challenges ahead of us regarding our two countries: terrorism, security, and a lot of other issues we will discuss. So we have a lot of work to be done together. Right. But I'm very, very honored and very pleased, because whatever the context could be, this relationship is stronger than the events. And on top of it, we have an excellent personal relationship. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
So we're almost back, are we not, to the War of Independence, where the Americans are fighting against the Brits and Lafayette and the French contingent side with the Americans. As Trump said, America's oldest ally. And Macron saying every time we fight together to defend liberty, we come out on top. And the Brits appear to have been somewhat sidelined by this. So I'm going to ask you that, considering Donald Trump is yet to visit the UK, are we in danger of losing our special relationship? Could we perhaps be going, I don't know, to the back of the queue? And if you think, yep, the damage is done, Macron has stolen a march on us here, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think, don't worry, it doesn't really matter, it's all just show. Trump is always really going to be our friend, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe you think even the concept of a special relationship actually is fake news in itself. And if you do tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, watch us on Facebook, comment there too. We're live here from LBC studio in London. And I have to say, the whole thing here is absolutely crazy. You know, we voted Brexit, Trump supported it. On the back of that, with a bit of a bow wave that Brexit had created, it helped Trump to get elected. And I really thought there was a great chance here for the Atlantic to get narrower and for us getting closer to America to use that as the strongest possible bargaining chip with Mr. Barnier and the European Union. And the truth is that none of it's happened. In fact, rather the opposite's happened. Let's remind ourselves what this wonderful speaker, John Bercow, had to say back in February 2017 about President Trump and whether he should visit Parliament.
We value our relationship with the United States. If a state visit takes place, that is way beyond and above the pay grade of the Speaker. However, as far as this place is concerned, I feel very strongly that our opposition to racism and to sexism and our support for equality before the law and an independent judiciary are hugely important considerations in the House of Commons.
What a ghastly little virtue signaler he is. I thought the Speaker was supposed to be neutral, but hey, this one's not. But if that wasn't enough, the Mayor of London, in June 2017, Sadiq Khan, continued to defend his total opposition to a state visit by the US President.
Prime Minister Theresa May offered Donald Trump a state visit moments after he was elected President. In the circumstances where a Muslim ban is in place, in the circumstances where he has changed the long-standing policy the USA has around refugees, and in the circumstances where state visits are given to a minority of world leaders with whom we have long-established links who have done great things. And in those circumstances, I said at the time, I don't think a state visit was appropriate, and my views haven't changed.
So a state visit hasn't happened, and we've had, many of Corbyn's supporters saying if the president comes, there'll be mass protests. There were no mass protests in France. Do you know the one thing that Bercow, Sadiq Khan and President Macron have is they're all very short. They're all much shorter than average height. But Macron has shown himself to be a much bigger man than the other two, because whatever his fundamental political differences with President Trump are, he's been prepared to put them to one side in what he sees as the greater interest of France. And he is right. And I have to say, I really do think we are making an absolute, total mess of this. And we've allowed France to jump way ahead of us, and none of this. I'm not blaming Macron. I think what he's done, actually, he's played a star role in all of this. He really has. Brilliant to get Trump there on Bastille Day last year. But what is our ever hesitant Theresa May, British Prime Minister leader, doing? I don't know. Nothing. We continue to have an ambassador in Washington, D.C., who was a committed globalist and Europhile, whose only major contribution, I think, was to criticise the president after he retweeted somebody who'd retweeted somebody else. And I think that we are in danger of losing a very special relationship with this president. He naturally loves this country. He is half British himself. His mum was a Scot. He's a fan of much of this country. Some of his very few overseas investments are in Scotland and indeed in Ireland too. But we've done nothing to really foster the relationship. I don't think we've even started to talk seriously about a trade deal. And I think Macron is jumping in there. Now, I've no idea whether Macron will succeed in changing Trump's opinion about the nuclear deal with Iran. I doubt he will. But having good relationships with people, you never know what might happen. So my contention is that we are in danger of losing that relationship, and that Macron has played a blinder and Theresa May has not even been on the pitch. That's my view. What does Ellis in Manchester think? Good evening.
Hi, Nigel. What I was going to say was, I actually think this is about respect more than anything. And I think that a lot of the British, our British politicians actually aren't showing any respect, and for the reason that America has a political system, and Donald Trump was elected by that political system. So by alienating Donald Trump, you are alienating the entirety of the American political system, because our ties with America go back way before Donald Trump, and they will go further than Donald Trump. But the fact is, we are just because Donald Trump says things that perhaps he shouldn't, we're just not prepared to actually listen to them and actually listen to his opinions and listen to America.
Yeah, I mean, Ellis, you're right. It is a long-term relationship, and it's always had its ups and downs, obviously. But the point I'm making is that that relationship with America now is perhaps even more important than it's been for decades, given with Brexit and everything else. This is a chance to strengthen our negotiating position.
Absolutely, and was it not Donald Trump that you were saying was one of the ones who was pushing for a trade deal with the United Kingdom, who was pushing and saying that we can do these deals? Why aren't we embracing this in a time when we need to be building relationships, and Donald Trump is offering them on a plate?
Ellis, I couldn't agree more. And Macron has seen that opportunity, and he's jumped in there with both feet. And good for him is all I can say, Ellis.
Yeah, absolutely. And by actually showing some respect to Donald Trump and talking with him. And when Donald Trump, if he says things that you don't agree with, then you can have an adult conversation and say why you don't agree with things and work properly, rather than just rejecting the notion of the fact that he is president of our greatest ally.
Yeah, no, Ellis, I'm with you 100%. Sally on Facebook says, invite him for a state visit now. Nandy says, UK-US special relationship, the US tells us what to do. And you could argue, actually, that even though they were saying what great friends they were with each other today, the very fact that Donald Trump, as he put it, was picking a piece of dandruff off Emmanuel Macron's collar, did say one thing: we're great friends, but I tell you what, I'm actually the boss. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 7:16. Now, the previous American president didn't seem to think very much of us at all. In fact, do you remember President Obama came to this country during the referendum campaign to give us some advice, and this is what he said.
Maybe some point down the line there might be a UK-US trade agreement, but it's not going to happen anytime soon, because our focus is in negotiating with a big bloc, the European Union, to get a trade agreement done. And UK is going to be in the back of the queue.
Oh, do you remember that? Do you remember that? I went mad when I heard that. I thought, how dare he? And anyway, no American would say queue, because they'd say back of the line. So clearly, these were the lines fed to him by Cameron and Osborne as the global elites gathered together to try and prevent Brexit from happening. Actually, the truth of it is I'm very grateful to Obama. I think he angered millions of people and probably helped actually the Brexit cause. But my contention, folks, is we may not be at the back of the queue or the line, but Macron is now at the front of it, and this has happened because we have made no efforts at all, and he has done the right thing, treated the American president with respect, rolled out the carpet on Bastille Day last year, and that's why we are where we are. But I'm equally keen to hear from you if you think that actually it doesn't matter anyway. Maybe you think there's no such thing as the special relationship, and if you do want to inject that point of view, 0345 6060 973, one or two of you on Facebook do take that view. John says, do you mean the special relationship in which the President of America tells our PM what to do and the PM does it? Didn't work with Harold Wilson, John, did it? Lyndon Johnson said special relationship, send troops to Vietnam. Wilson said no, correctly. Roseanne says there never was a special relationship. It's a myth, and much made of it when it suits either the British or the American governments. Roseanne, I disagree with that. I think you'll find, not just in terms of NATO, but in terms of intelligence sharing, there are remarkably close relationships, and important ones, between our government. On Facebook again, trust me, the UK won't lose its special relationship with the USA. The UK has too much history with America. Well, we'll see, and that may be in the bigger picture true, but in the short term, the horse that's in the lead is the one that Macron is riding. Aaron is a brand new caller from Liverpool. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Nigel. It's a pleasure to talk to you finally. I've talked to a fellow of your colleagues, and it's finally time to talk to you.
Well, I'm very pleased you are. And was it easy to get through or not?
Yes, relatively.
Yeah, tonight's relatively easy, folks. If you've never called before, the switchboard, actually, as soon as you said that, they're all lighting up like a Belisha beacon. But anyway, Aaron, so, I'm making the point here that we are in danger for the next few years of losing that special relationship and not taking advantage of what was a naturally pro-British president sitting in the White House.
I think you're right, but I think there's a procession of how we got here, and I think it began with us having a lot of prejudice. Go back a year and a half ago when this clown, as some people would say, it came onto the world stage, and we all thought he would go within a year. Fast forward to now when, his being involved in brokering peace with North Korea, he's established, because of his ability that nobody expected to actually find in him, he's actually established himself as a world leader. And now I think some people in Westminster are looking pretty red-faced.
Are you, Aaron, one of those people who's been surprised by what he's done?
I was at first, yes. I thought in the first few days of his premiership, I thought, do you know what? He doesn't act prime ministerial. He doesn't act presidential.
No, he acts. No. He acts Trump-like, doesn't he?
Exactly, and that's the thing that I think threw everybody off. But what really surprised me is that it only took me about 2 or 3 months where I thought, you know what, maybe actually we should start to give this guy a bit of a chance. And the establishment have been dragging their feet. I mean, 2 years on, they still think he's a clown and not to be dealt with. So yes, we are in danger of.
Yeah, no, I think we are too. And Aaron, your point, he doesn't fit the normal mould of statesman. This is an outspoken New Yorker. He does think things Trump style. But Aaron, he gets things done, and I agree with you. We're wasting opportunities. Rob has a go on SMS. Nigel, are you getting jealous that a major player in the EU is getting close to your little chum in the USA? He's not little, he's big. When will you realise Trump is no friend of you or the UK? Trump is only a friend of Trump. Well, Rob, you may say that, but let me tell you something. There are people I know and I've met who've known this guy for 30, 40 years. And if you're a friend and you're trusted and you keep within that circle, actually, he's a very, very loyal man. Dave is very complacent about it. And he says on SMS, "Hi, Nigel, don't worry about the French visit. When Trump comes to this great country of ours, he'll have a game of golf, a real glass of beer, fish and chips, tea and scones, the countryside, historic places. He'll love it. Nothing to worry about." Well, all of that, Dave, may be right, apart from the beer. Trump does not drink. In fact, he's never drunk. He's managed to avoid the evils of alcohol, which maybe is why he is so strong and fit and well at the age of 72. Owen is calling from Birmingham. Good evening, Owen.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, have I got this right or wrong? I think Macron has raced past this and now has a much more advantageous relationship with Trump than Theresa May does.
Well, I think maybe Macron and Trump might be closer than our current leaders, but there's no way that we can actually ignore the, sort of past 60, 70 years of such a close relationship. Just because US presidents are only in for 4 or 8 years. And, one man cannot make such sweeping decisions. It's done by a collective body, and that collective body recognises the importance of our relationship with them.
Yeah, OK. And by the way, let's not say 60, 70 years. Let's say 100 years, because right now, 100 years ago, American troops were arriving on the Western Front in huge numbers and fought big, big battles from early summer onwards.
Well, yeah, but then, it didn't. I would argue that the special relationship as we see it today never really kicked in until 1945, because, that it was America was still on the fence quite a lot in the run-up to World War II. As opposed to they were at the end of it when we went in with a lot of. Owen,
we haven't always immediately supported each other, and sometimes not at all. And we didn't over Vietnam, just being one example.
Well, whereas they didn't over Suez, It was just,
no, that's absolutely right. And I wish we hadn't over Iraq, but that's a separate debate for another day.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so you think, well, Owen, okay. Long term, you may be right. Long term, this may not do us any damage. But do you see my point? That right now, we need a full diplomatic offensive in Washington, D.C. We should be getting ourselves ready to go with a trade deal with the USA as quickly as possible. And I want Mr. Barnier and the others in Brussels to know that, and we're not doing it, Owen.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's some sort of part of the negotiations where we're not allowed to start doing our trade deals. But I would definitely hope that the Department for International Trade and Business will be at least having behind closed door talk so that we can get out the starting gate as quickly as possible. Because after
they've met, Owen. They've met, Owen. We know they've met, but I have not heard on the intelligence grapevine in DC, and I've got a fairly few good connections over there. I have not heard anywhere on the grapevine that any serious negotiating of any kind is going on. And even if the EU say we can't do it, as you say, we should jolly well do it anyway. Yeah, and I do think it is just because that we're not hearing everything. I do think it would be if it, as you say, it's not happening and we're not having these closed door conversations, then what on earth are Mrs. May and her government getting up to? Well, quite.
I mean, if we're getting kicked out, if we're leaving this massive trade bloc and she's just sat there twiddling her thumbs and waiting for us to become some sort of broken economy on the shores of Europe, then she needs to pull her finger out and get that sorted. Quite right. She needs to do something. Owen, thank you. Paddy is a brand new caller from Doncaster in South Yorkshire. Good evening, Paddy.
Good evening, Nigel. I hope you're well.
I'm well. What do you think about our relationship with America?
Well, I'm just wondering why we need this, or I say why your country need the special relationship with the United States. And
when you say my country, which is your country, Paddy?
It's certainly not the United Kingdom. And
so can I? I'm very curious. As you're calling from Doncaster, Paddy, as you're calling from Doncaster, so who do you identify with in terms of nationhood then?
Insofar as that question, Nigel, who the hell would want a special relationship with the United Kingdom? This two-way street that's been created seems to be built on a false narrative, on a false pedestal. It's really, really curious.
Intelligence, defence, trade, shared language, shared values.
Oh, well, we all know about the shared values. This imperialism that's been going round and round is certainly this sort of rather cynical, really, really cynical bombing and imperialism of various places, including Iraq, Ireland, Afghanistan, Palestine, and all the rest of it.
Can I ask you, Paddy? Can I ask you, Paddy? Do you take a very anti-American stance, regardless whether Obama's in office or Trump's in office?
No, because they're both the same, aren't they?
All right, fine. No, I get it, Paddy. I get it, and and Paddy, and there is that view. Not everybody thinks America matters. I think America matters a lot, and I'm annoyed, really annoyed, that we haven't grabbed the initiative, and I somewhat admire President Macron for doing what he's done. I don't agree with his views on the European Union or globalism, but I tell you what, he's a clever little operator. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It is now 7:30 and, well, there he is, Emmanuel Macron, the first state visit during the Trump presidency, and it's grand and it's big. They're appearing on balconies and waving at crowds. There's a big state banquet. We've had press conferences. They're professing their friendship for each other. But it's interesting that Trump, for all the I love Emmanuel and it being reciprocated, he is showing who's boss. There is that moment where he picks a bit of dandruff, as he calls it, off Emmanuel Macron's collar. And another extraordinary moment when they're outside the White House, heading out to the terrace, and Trump grabs Emmanuel Macron's hand and then sort of runs away, almost like a child's game in the playground. You can see both of those fascinating insights on lbc.co.uk. So Trump, huge respect for Macron, but he's trying to show who the boss is. Meanwhile, in Westminster, well, Jeremy Corbyn has been in meetings with Jewish groups. Those meetings are still going on. I can't give you any up-to-date news reports on them. But what I can say is that Jacob Rees-Mogg has been speaking today, and he's questioned the Prime Minister's enthusiasm for Brexit. And in one way, you could say that's delightfully understated. But in another, you've got the leader here of 60 backbench Conservative MPs. Basically what he's saying, but he's being nice about it, is she doesn't really believe in Brexit, and perhaps that's why she's been so hesitant. He goes a lot further, though, and he uses language. Well, it's the sort of language I used to use. He says that the potential plans for a customs partnership are completely cretinous. That's quite strong language. In fact, when I used to use language like that, I was accused of being some terrible, awful, evil populist. I wonder what the newspapers tomorrow morning are going to make of Jacob Rees-Mogg's comments. Quite a lot, I would have thought. But Jacob, his defenders would say, and believers in Brexit would say, that Jacob is now the most prominent person in Parliament who wants the will of Brexit to be carried out. And I say the will because, come on, remember, every single leading figure on both the Leave side and the Remain side, and that wretched leaflet that Cameron spent £9 million on and put through our doors, all of it said, if we vote to leave, we are voting to leave the European Union's single market and customs union. And what is being attempted here is very deceitful at every single level. But back to Trump, Macron, are we now behind France in the queue? Does it matter? What does Sam in Fulham think? Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. An absolute pleasure to talk to you. I think, we're missing the point. I mean, Trump, as you've often said, and many of you have said, is very transactional a character.
Yep.
And I think during one of your former speakers said, in the run-up to Trump's election campaign, even when he was still the nominee for the Democratic Party, and then he won that, and then obviously went up, became the man in
Republican Party, yeah.
Republican Party to fight Democrats.
Yeah.
Theresa May was busy following, the European sort of ridiculing of Trump, and
yes.
And, when our appalling sort of mayor had been abusing Trump and trying to sort of get him disinvited and all that sort of stuff, she hasn't really stuck a finger out and said, no, this is our ally, we need to be with him, and really been quite defensive. So I think Trump is really just playing a canny game in the sense that he's probably playing France against the UK and UK against France.
Is he playing hard to get, Sam? Is that what he's doing?
No, I think he's basically saying to the UK, well, look, we do need, he wouldn't say it quite like this, I know he's your mate, but he is saying, look, we do need a pragmatic poodle in Europe, and it's going to be UK or France, because you're part of the Security Council, and if it's not going to be UK, then it will be France. I don't think that, the relationship that is being peddled particularly by the French at the moment is as strong from a Trump point of view. I think it's pure pragmatics. The absence of a UK playing its usual role.
And Sam, let me ask you a question, difficult question. Do you think that Macron is there just representing France, or do you think he might have had a conversation with Mr. Juncker and others in Brussels?
Well, I think that, you have to remember that, Trump does know that the Europeans are sort of getting excited about the European army, and obviously from a NATO point of view, there's a pragmatic play there. If you reel in Macron, and the power of the French sort of role in the military in Europe, then obviously you create a very difficult thing, because obviously you try and sort of get your diplomats to trumpet forgive the pun, the benefits of NATO, and therefore maybe you might have an ally there from actually not pushing so hard on the European army.
No, interesting. Sam, thank you. Great call. I do wonder about some of this. I get on Twitter, you are wrong. It's nothing to do with Britain's lack of action. It's that the EU is a far bigger market for Trump. JB, who sent that on Twitter, you are wrong. This administration in Washington does not believe in making deals with supranational bodies. Trump was at pains today to talk about the great nation of France, about it being America's oldest ally. Back to those days, as I said earlier, of Lafayette. I don't believe that for one moment. Flooded with Facebook messages, Irene says, I hope Donald realises he has a lot of support here. Yeah, well, not from the Prime Minister, and not from most of our political establishment, I'm afraid, and that's why we are where we are. Jamie says, we will always have a good relationship with the US. The UK made America. I don't think, Jamie, that's a view that you go over there and tell them. It wouldn't go down terribly well. Steve says, Sadiq Khan does not speak for the whole of the UK. He has ideas way above his station. Steve, whatever Sadiq Khan thinks about Donald Trump, or that awful Burko, who should be neutral, whatever they think about Trump as a person, the fact is the relationship with America actually is more important than their own personal virtue signalling. And Edward says, send John Bercow out to shoot a round of golf with a Donald. I think he'll be pleasantly surprised. I don't know whether Bercow plays golf. He plays tennis, that I do know. I think he was rather good, actually. Andrew Castle, who of course broadcast on LBC and played many Wimbledons, said that he did know Bercow from the tennis court. So, but I don't know whether Bercow's a golfer, but I just can't see. Can you just think of that? Bercow and Trump walking down the first fairway. Do you know what, Edward? Lovely idea. It ain't gonna happen. Richard is calling from Sidcup. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Nigel. Hi. I hope Donald Trump is as loyal as you stated he was earlier on in your show, because he is diametrically opposed to Emmanuel Macron.
Yes.
We seem to be, our position with regard to Brexit, our backs seem to be against the wall with it. We've got the Irish, we've got our own House of Lords, we've got our own Remainers, the fanatical Remainers in the House of Commons as well. We've got a very tricky vote to get through.
Yep.
And to see him meeting Macron and brushing dandruff off of his collar and fawning over him like a pair of camp antique dealers, it worries me. You know, it just worries me. Where is he going? I mean, is he just seduced by the bells and whistles and the trumpets and the soldiers? Is that his...
I don't think, Richard, I don't think Trump has been seduced by it, but I do think this. I think that Trump has been treated with such absolute disdain by so many in the British political system that when he was invited by the French under Macron, you know, of all the leaders, when he was invited there for Bastille Day, Richard, I think he just liked to be treated with a bit of respect as the most important global leader there is.
Yeah, and so he should be. And we've had a conversation before, certainly when Bercow wasn't slapped down by Theresa May, as he should have been put in his place. Now, I either think Trump has got no respect privately for Theresa May because he sees her as somebody who's not going to be in a job for long, because she's becoming increasingly unpopular over here on both sides of the Brexit argument.
So do you think, basically, Richard, he's given up on Theresa May? Is that that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Well, I would have done if I was him, but I certainly would have gone rushing off to France to meet Emmanuel Macron, who as I said earlier, is the complete opposite. If Trump is the anti-globalist he claims to be, then I wouldn't have had any time for Macron either. You know, it just worries me a little bit that he can be seduced by...
Well, my guess is, Richard, that when it comes to Iran, for argument's sake, and where Macron is a big believer in the Iran nuclear deal, and President Trump is not, and certainly... You know, John Bolton, who's just come into office as National Security Advisor, is not. I would have thought, nor is Mike Pompeo, you know, the new Secretary of State. I don't think, whatever the smiles and friendship, I do not think Macron will get anything out of Donald Trump on that Iran deal. I'd be very, very surprised if he did. But he might get something on tariffs. You never know. Richard, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Terry makes a really interesting point. He says Macron's France can inherit the myth called the special relationship. But more importantly, he says this. Macron is trying to isolate Britain post-Brexit. Now, that's a very interesting thought. And maybe that's why I teased a moment ago. You know, it could be with Macron going there, with Merkel, albeit a somewhat weakened Merkel, heading over there before too long. Maybe the EU have thought, this is interesting. We can make life even more difficult for the Brits. And you know what? If we hadn't been so politically correct, if we hadn't been so busy virtue signalling, we could and should be using our relationship with America, and particularly an impending trade deal. That should have been our bargaining chip against them, not the other way round. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 7:45. Jeremy Corbyn's meeting with Jewish groups has now finally come to a close. No press statements, no comments as yet, but you will, in Clive Bull's show from top of the hour, get that news as it breaks. And before we get back to the fact that the French are now ahead of us in the queue, as President Obama said when he came here during the Brexit referendum, there's one other thing I do want to comment on. You may remember, those that were listening last year, to the Charlie Gard case, the young, very sick baby whose parents wanted him to go to America to get treatment, but that was stopped by the medical authorities in this country, backed up by the courts. Well, there's another case very like this. It's Alfie Evans, from Liverpool, and his parents have fought a hell of a battle to get him to go and get treatment in Italy. And Alfie's parents went to meet Pope Francis. Pope Francis said some very positive things, and believe it or not, the Italian president has even granted Alfie Evans Italian citizenship. So his parents thought, well, surely there can be no problem in getting this child to Italy to get this treatment. There was no guarantee this treatment would have worked, but that is what his parents wanted. Anyway, despite all, the life support machine was switched off earlier today, and doctors are astonished that 9 hours on, the little boy is still breathing. Despite everyone saying that he wouldn't last for very long at all. Now, it doesn't look like this case can have a good outcome, but I want to say this. What right does the state, what right do the medical authorities have to remove from parents the perfectly reasonable choice of taking a terminally ill child to Italy to get a different kind of treatment? You know, technology moves, science moves at different speeds in different parts of the world, and I was disgusted with the Charlie Gard case, and I'm disgusted too with the Alfie Evans case. What has happened to parental choice and freedom? There's something very, very wrong here, in my opinion. Back to the president. Has Emmanuel Macron stolen a march on us? I believe he has. Has this happened because Macron showed the French president respect, whereas we seem to continually hurl abuse at him? Tom is a brand new caller to the show, and he's calling from Wandsworth. Good evening, Tom.
Good evening to you, Nigel. I'm actually an American journalist who's been here for about half a century, and I'm currently writing a book about the special relationship.
Oh, wow.
It's something I've been studying, something I've been writing about for 50 years. We are so far ahead of the French that, it would take them centuries to catch up. I mean, American law is based on British law, the Magna Carta, English common law.
Yes.
The system of government, the whole philosophies behind it were based on people like Edmund Burke. As you have pointed out, our intelligence service are almost one. They act together. The CIA head of station sits in on the JIC, Joint Intelligence Chief meetings every week, and vice versa in Washington. 50% of all the investment in this country is from the United States. They are the biggest investor in the UK. We are the biggest foreign investor in
their country.
US.
Yeah. Tom, these are all very, very valid points. And I, I've said twice already tonight, I don't think the long-term relationship with America on these key issues is going to be damaged. But there is a short-term... I put to you, Tom, as somebody who's looked at this for 50 years, I put this to you, that we have a short-term priority, which is to use the fact that we have a pro-Brexit, pro-British president to say to the EU and the world that a positive trade deal is going to happen between our countries, and that we could use that, Tom, as leverage in our negotiations, and we don't appear to be doing it. And in the short term, I think we're being outflanked by Macron.
Talks, and they've been told, the British have been told, that the Open Skies Agreement, which gives us landing rights, would not apply to the UK anymore, so we're going to lose a lot of our airline slots to British Airways that are held by British Airways and Virgin Atlantic. We've also been told we're going to have to accept chlorinated chicken and various things like that. They want to get our agricultural products into the UK. They're very keen on that. So, I don't think the trade deal is as much in a bag as a lot of people like to think.
Well, it may or may not be in the bag. In fact, Tom, I'm certain it's not in the bag at all. I just don't think we're trying hard enough, Tom.
Well, the problem is I don't think Trump is going to last. I'd be very surprised if he's re-elected. I'd be very surprised if he even sees out this term.
Right. Well, Tom, I don't know. All I'll tell you is, and I take a rather different view. I think tax reform, I think growth at 3.1% across America. Yeah, sure, he's got all sorts of problems in his backyard. The Mueller investigation, the Stormy Daniels stuff. I mean, it's not easy. But I think, Tom, that and the position he's taken America to in the world, he could come back in 2020 with a bigger majority, a much bigger majority. He just needs to get through the midterms. Tom, thank you. And Tom, a long-term student of this, who says whatever Macron does, actually the bonds between our two countries are too great, too historic, too fundamental, too cultural and too important. And on the big picture, I agree. I'm not happy at all. Could Macron be at the front of the queue because he is leader of a major EU country? No, Craig, I promise you that the whole approach of this administration is to deal with nation-states. It's nation-states they respect, not the agglomeration in Brussels. In fact, there are some people in Washington holding senior office who are more Eurosceptic than I am, I promise you. David is calling from East Finchley. Good evening, David.
Hi, Nigel. Good to speak with you again. I thought Tom made some really good points about our special relationship, and I wanted to add that I think there's a couple of positive things from the Trump-Macron relationship. Firstly, the French are joining in. Generally it is the US who takes on these big campaigns, and then there's us, Britain, and to a lesser extent, other European countries. Here we have the French stepping up to the plate for whatever reason, whether it's because the French have imperialistic desires again, or probably because of all the troubles they've had internally, all the terrorism, this is the time. We welcome them. Share the cost. It can't just be us in Europe. And normally when we take action, I think that there's quite a few European countries who are against us stepping outside the European fold and joining the Americans in whatever military campaign we go for. So it's good. It's a good thing. And I would welcome it. And secondly,
David, I'm not arguing that the French president and the American president having a good relationship is a bad thing. I wasn't arguing that. I was just saying that for us it represents a slight missed opportunity.
Well, I think, look, what we're seeing right now, Trump, hailing Macron as a hero, let it happen. If it means the French really now are going to be doing this and share the burden and responsibility of necessary military campaigns, so be it.
Well, let's hope you're right. Let's hope you're right, David, because I worry how NATO can coexist with the emerging European army. David, I'm going to let you go. I want to get one last caller in. John, brand new caller to the show, and he's calling from the Isle of Wight. Good evening.
Nigel, hi. It's a bit daunting, but
it's not.
Great to speak to you.
Just think we're having a chat in the pub, John.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't mind being in the pub with you at the moment. even though I'm a Remainer, but not a Ramona.
What,
anyway,
John? The whole point about proper, free, open democracy is we can disagree with each other but still be civil, and that's very, very important. I think.
Well, I accept democracy. Actually, I thought the result would be I thought it'd be like 60-40 to leave. But anyway, now the thing is, the French have always had an era, they're anarchists, a lot of anarchists. I didn't invent anarchy. You got guys like Wat Tyler and people like that. And there's a lot of left-wingers in France. But when President Trump visited, they were impeccable.
They were.
They treated him with respect.
Yep.
Look for the French, they love American culture. There's a lot of things that, Clint Eastwood has been given France's highest honour. I think Eastwood is actually more popular in France than he is in his home nation. A lot of that's political as well. But what worries me is the rabble-rouse of the Owen Joneses. They want to, when President Trump comes over here, they want to, this Garci thing, show your rump. I think it's disgusting, show your rump to Trump.
Yep.
He should be treated as our oldest ally.
Yeah.
And the guy has...
I tell you, John, France jumping ahead of us in the queue is not just because of the way Macron has behaved, it's because of the way we've behaved. John, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Enjoy the Isle of Wight this evening. My final thought can be summed up, I think, by a tweet I've got from Mirelle. She says, "We had a fantastic opportunity in the UK with Trump as president. He was genuinely fond of us, unlike the previous president. So, what have our political classes done? Completely blown it. I have to say, hats off to Macron. He has played a blinder." Mirelle, that's exactly what I think too. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night at 7. At 10 this evening, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Thank you, Nigel.